Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving deep into something that affects every single one of us, which is our nervous system. Yes. And you know that invisible force behind our stress levels, like digestion, sleep, and even how safe we feel in our skin. But here's the catch, most of us are running on autopilot, stuck in survival mode without even realizing it. So, how do we shift from fight, flight, freeze? That's amazing, right? Fight, flight, freeze to a place of true ease. So how do we build a real connection between our mind and the body without forcing practices that just don't feel right? That's exactly what we will be unpacking today with our amazing guest, Kelly. So, welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you, Avik. I'm honored to be here, and I love that introduction because it says so much. We all have a nervous system, right? And so, what that means is, yes, we have a nervous system, like you said, that can go on autopilot, and it can
Mhm.
be weeks, months, years before we realize we've been on autopilot. But we also have this innate gift within us that we can use, which is how to regulate our nervous system. And I also really appreciate that you brought up the word safety because that's a big part of what people are looking for and struggling to find in today's world, actually.
Very true. That's very true. And I'll also quickly introduce you to the listeners. So, dear listeners, Kelly has spent over 25 years helping people regulate their nervous systems through the movement, gut health, and emotional well-being. So she is a former meditation dropout turned movement based healer, and she is here to share how we can all reclaim our body's natural ability to heal and feel at home within ourselves. So, if you have ever felt disconnected from your body, or maybe struggled with the stress, or wondered like why traditional meditation just doesn't work for me, then this episode is for you. So, let's dive in. So Kelly, I mean, I love like how you describe your work as helping people shift from fight, flight, freeze, and so if you can share like what exactly looks like in everyday life for you. I mean, how
Sure.
do you, if you're stuck in survival mode or not?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't even realize that they
Mm,
are stuck in survival mode. And I lived there for many years myself, classic overachiever, perfectionist. And so I just thought being tense and stressed out and in
mm,
different ways that would present was just the way it had to be an overachiever. And I'm super grateful to share that after much work and discovery and learning, and also helping others with this, in addition to my own journey, I know that it's so easy to find the ease. So if someone's in survival mode, again, they may not even know that they're there. They
yeah.
might feel just really tense. They might feel irritable. They might feel like they have a short fuse. They might walk around feeling nauseous. They might be like this one woman that I have served who really couldn't stop doing things. Like she was in the day to day, had to be busy, 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 could never stop. And when she later looked at it, she was kind of running away from some emotions and feelings that she didn't feel she could process. And so it can
Mm,
present so differently for different people. And then, of course, at the other end of fight, flight, freeze is the freeze where we just want to hide in our bed, pull the covers over, and stay there for hours or days on end. So
mm,
it can present very differently, and it can also change the way that it presents in every phase of life. Maybe in your 20s, it presents in a certain way as constant GI stress. And maybe in your 30s and 40s, it's that incessant rumination and anxiety that's showing up. And so finding that you can really tune in. I was just teaching a workshop last night, and we were really exploring the idea of noticing. Can you notice what's bubbling up? So many of us are so fast, have so many demands on our daily life that
Yeah.
we don't even realize that, oh, that knot in the stomach is tied to this situation, current or
Mm.
past, or maybe even some anticipatory anxiety about what's ahead. So I think the first thing is to make sure that you really are in tune with your body. And a lot of
Mm.
people struggle with that. And it can be as simple as taking a moment and scanning your body, noticing where the tense spots are, noticing where the discomfort, because physical discomfort is very often underneath it, there is an emotional component, right? So if we can actually find that spot and even put our hand over it and start to describe it in different ways to ourselves, just to ourselves, it doesn't have to be to anyone else, it can really help us start to become in tune with it. And then we can
Mm.
start to do some things to move beyond it. And I'm happy to share about that, the tools of moving beyond it whenever you're ready.
Lovely. That's really amazing, I have to say. A- And I mean, according to you, what are some of the surprising ways that nervous system dysregulation shows up that uh, people might not even realize?
Yeah, so as I was saying, definitely feeling anxious, feeling tired, nauseous. Another area that might surprise people is difficulty concentrating. Because when
Ah,
your nervous system or focusing, a lot of people are realizing that they're somewhere in the ADD, ADHD, neurodivergence world. And it's great that people are realizing that. And even if
mm,
someone doesn't have a full on presentation of that, then
yeah.
they might be dealing with sort of like today's current world causing
Mm,
us to have challenges with focus. And if there's a challenge with focus, I'm going to say, what developmental movements that are inspired by developmental reflexes, what
mm,
reflexes are maybe needing support? For example, if focus is one of those areas that
mm,
someone's struggling with because they're dysregulated, then I might say, let's get on the floor if that's available to them and explore the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. Because these very early developmental reflexes are how we
yeah.
develop motor skills, but also cognitive skills. And so getting these people on the floor, and I may not tell them what it's about because I can nerd out about this stuff. I love it, right? But I say, let's just try this really simple movement. It's great for your spine, it's great for your brain. I'll leave it at that, right? And then we start that movement and they go, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. My mind is clearer because a lot of people are also dealing with brain fog. Brain fog's a big part of fight, flight, freeze, and that ties into the concentration and focus. But when they do a simple movement, it's so very simple, like that one that I'm describing, it's
Mm,
amazing. Then they start to have greater awareness. And then one simple movement might help them to say, oh, that stiffness in my shoulder,
mhm,
yes, maybe there was an old injury, but it's always triggered when I'm under stress. And I don't remember who first coined this term, but our issues are truly in our tissues, right? And
yeah.
maybe it was Tara Birch, but I always like to give credit where credit is due. But we do find that those emotional situations that aren't fully acknowledged, validated, and processed, they do show up in our body. And when our nervous system isn't regulated and supported and nourished, it's going to show up in our body. And I did mention today's world is really setting us up for challenges around this. And a big part of it, which I know you know, is all the
Mhm.
screen time, all the devices, the two-dimensional, right? I'm always
Yeah.
talking about how we have a nature deficit. We need to get people off the screens, even if for 5 minutes, and get them back to a three-dimensional experience. That's huge.
Mm, understood. It's lovely. So, I mean, you openly share that traditional meditation didn't work for you, and I think like so many people can relate to that as well. So, what was it about stillness that didn't resonate, and how did that movement become your path to the regulation?
Yeah. So
Mhm.
I definitely refer to myself as a former meditation failure or dropout. And I am someone, again, I said that I'm high, now I consider myself high achieving instead of overachieving or recovering overachiever and perfectionist. So failing at something really wasn't an option. But excuse me, I was trying to sit in meditation. So let me just kind of cue this up. I was in my 20s, had opened a business. kind of naive, didn't really understand what I was getting into. The first rehab and Pilates multidisciplinary clinic, I was also trying to get pregnant, struggling with fertility issues. And I was trying to sit in stillness, and the chatter would come in and interrupt me. And I know that a lot of times we're taught in meditation, it's okay if the chatter comes up, notice it, see if you can gently guide it away to find some quieter moments. But that experience agitated me further. It actually put me in fight, flight, freeze survival mode because I was struggling so much. So I kept trying, and it wasn't resonating. And I thought, wait a second, how have I found peace and calm in the past? And as
Mm.
someone who grew up loving dance and still dances a little bit now, I knew that movement was something for me. And I had, at this point, when I was really bumping up against these challenges with meditation, I had gone through comprehensive Pilates training, and I loved Pilates, and did a little bit of yoga, and I just wasn't feeling that calm afterwards. So I then decided I had to meet myself where I was at, just like I do for the people that I serve. I'm going to meet them where they're at, just bring enough of something into their experience that they're ready for, and not want to overwhelm them or not choose a modality that doesn't resonate with them. So I said to myself, I need to find a form of moving meditation that really honors the brain and the body connection. And, again, Pilates is said to have a real brain body connection. And for a lot of people, it does. But I think
Mm.
at that state for me personally, it wasn't enough. It wasn't going deep enough. And now, side note, I've taken Pilates and added nervous system regulation so it can go deeper and truly regulate the nervous system. But I
Wow.
decided I needed a moving form of meditation, and I couldn't really find what I needed. So I
Mm.
created it. I went and studied the Brain Gym body of work, and that's an incredible body of work. I went back to my roots as an occupational therapist and really studied neurodevelopment again and earliest development. And what I was finding is that, yes, a lot of times young children, especially in today's world that doesn't have as much freedom and movement, they will bump into challenges with development and reflexes. But a lot of adults who, we played outside as kids, we had natural movement, and so that's not as much of an issue, except life, stress, trauma, illness, car accidents cause us to trip up those developmental sequences that we had moved through and integrated, and they cause stress. So I started playing, I started exploring, and I started finding that if I was using developmental movements in certain sequences that honor going back through the developmental sequences,
Mm.
for example, never ending in a same-sided movement, right arm, right leg, always ending in an oppositional contralateral, because that's what integrates the brain and the body. That's where the calm, that's where the groundedness came in. So I kept tweaking it, and I would give little tastes to the people that I serve, and they were having great responses. So I kept working with it, developing it, and taking creative license for all these modalities that I'm fortunate to have in my toolbox. And I created systems of movement that are very integrating, that truly are brain body, because it goes back to the earliest development and helps us re-nourish and re-educate some of those sequences that get tripped up when we're in a survival state.
Wow. Lovely. So that's amazing. I mean, so for someone who is struggling with the meditation but still wants to experience the benefit, what would you recommend as the first step?
Yeah, I like to make it simple for people. And when we work with our innate resources of our nervous system, we don't really need any fancy equipment at all. But because it can sometimes be hard to pick up an exercise from an audio, the first thing I'd say, and I love this recommendation because everyone knows how to do this.
Yeah.
And unless they have different abilities, and then we'd come up with something different. But go
Mm.
out of your setting, work setting, house, and go for a walk. Your nervous system, and I wrote an article about a year ago about how you can tap into your nervous system with walking, and then even take it a little further with some preparatory exercises. But the nervous system needs that experience. Treadmills are fine, but if you have a choice, I'd prefer you get out and walk. And walk somewhere, it doesn't have to be a forest, but somewhere where
Mm.
there's trees or bushes or something to look at. And as you're walking, start to trace the outline of these items in nature, trees and so forth, or even a mailbox if you're in a neighborhood. Trace that outline with your eyes because it takes you out of that out of that two-dimensional experience into a three-dimensional experience, which is so important because we get into, pardon me, something called eye lock. And that's a real stress state. And when you're walking, you're also reminding the nervous system of that contralateral oppositional patterning. The arm swing just naturally brings us into that oppositional movement, and it really helps to re-stimulate, re-educate something called the gait reflex, which is more of a lifelong reflex. And we need that automaticity. So when we're stressed, the first thing we
Yeah.
could do is just go for a walk. And maybe you can't get outdoors. Maybe you're working in a high-rise building or live in an apartment in a building. Walk around your dining table and try to make sure you set the devices aside. I'm going to take my phone with me on my walk just to keep me safe, or sometimes I might listen to a great podcast like this, but I'm going to make sure I save some time to really observe and notice nature. So that's the first thing you could do. Then the other thing is a very simple movement called a cross crawl, which you could do this seated or standing. If you're standing, you're going to reach your left arm across to your right thigh and lift your right leg up, almost like you're marching, but we want to bring it into the midline a little bit more. And it's so simple. I could stand and show it if you like. And it's doing that movement. I tell people when you don't know what to do the cross crawl, cross body movement. And then when we work together more in depth, we'll do all sorts of various movements that are cross body movements. And then we might even take some time to do some of the same sided movements beforehand because that's where the stress and the trauma lives. But you always want to come back to the cross body movements because it's integrating the right and left side of the brain and the body.
That's that's really amazing, I have to say. Yeah. And like one thing that really stands out about your approach is that you don't separate emotions from the movement. So if you can share like how emotional patterns get stored in the body and how the movement helps release them.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Avik. I love talking about the emotional side. I
Mm,
grew up in a generation in a family
mm,
where we didn't talk about emotions. You just push them down and you just keep going because you just got to keep on putting one step forward. And then, of course, as a dancer, the show must go on, right? So just different modeling for me in terms of emotions. So I love teaching the young people in my life to acknowledge and validate and move through emotions. And I love teaching people of all ages because I've worked with 88-year young people who never had that opportunity. And when they're offered it, it's a game changer for them. So when we're moving in those movements, like same arm as leg movements, the homolateral movements or ipsilateral movements, it's where the big emotions can come up. So the simplest way I would tell people to do this is to start moving. A great movement too, if anybody can recall this movement from childhood, is a snow angel type of movement. So both arms and legs are moving. And, if you don't live somewhere with snow, you could think of it as a sand angel, but you're lying down and your arms are and legs are moving sort of from a big X to a tighter X, if you can imagine that. And just be in those movements for a bit, the snow angel and the same sided movement, and see what bubbles up. And this is my biggest invitation to you. Can you be curious about what bubbles up? Because at
mm.
first, we might feel one emotion. And a lot of times, and please acknowledge and validate that emotion. And then a lot of times, when we drill down underneath it, a lot of times the basis of many emotions is fear. And then we want to acknowledge that fear. And that's when I take people through the fear paralysis reflex movements, which are really gentle. It's actually a hands-on self-soothing movement. And then there are movements that we do with it as well. But take some time to be in the snow angel movement and be in the same arm as leg movement and be with those emotions. Now, make sure after you do this, this is important. If you hear nothing else from this conversation, take this. After you're in those moments of acknowledging and being with those emotions and sensations, then go ahead and go into the cross body movement, that march with the arm reaching across, cross body, cross crawl movement. You always want to finish with that. And I really invite people to start with the cross body movement, go into the deeper emotions with the other types of movements, and then come back out of it with the cross body movement. So we can never have too much cross body movement. But when you want to acknowledge those emotions, this workshop I taught last night was on the emotion of grief and
Mm.
acknowledging it. And it was only 45 minutes, but we went through various movements and sequences. We layered in sounding and eye movements because that's very important as well, and honored that grief. Now, a few weeks prior, as a prep, we had done a 10-minute, what I call emotions in motion, where we take 10 minutes and just move through because life is busy. We don't always have 40 or 45 minutes to do the sequencing, the repatterning we did last night, but taking 10 minutes and moving through something like what I described, a few snow angels and some cross crawl, and maybe then touch the midline, go to the breastbone and just gently press down on that area, move your hands down. The midline is the home base of safety. So giving yourself the gift of acknowledging emotions and realizing that we as humans are emotional beings. And if we don't process it now, it's going to show up 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years from now in our body and our mind. So I'm sort of on a mission to help people realize that processing emotions is so valuable and so necessary. And even in my studio clinic, we have the plush stuffed character from Inside Out to the movie Embarrassment, because sometimes the topics we talk about with gut health and whatnot can be embarrassing. So I have that plush in there and I say, okay, if you're feeling embarrassment, hold on to this. And it's sort of childlike and playful, but adults need that opportunity to go back to playfulness and feel like we're acknowledging emotions that may have been there since early in life.
Wow, lovely. That's a great, great thing. Yeah.
Thank
I mean, I have to say it's really huge. Thank you so much for sharing this. And um, like a lot of people think healing is just about managing the symptoms, but you talk about truly feeling at home in your body. So, what does that mean to you, and how can people start shifting towards that mindset?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. So, feeling at home in our body doesn't mean that we don't have intense emotions like anger or fear or frustration or um, even rage. Unprocessed anger can turn into rage, and it doesn't mean we act out on that. But I think feeling at home in our body means we can move through, key phrase there is through those emotions in healthy ways and process them. I've
Oh,
seen in myself and others, we're not at home in our body when we deny those feelings. Like a lot of people are functioning in life from the head up. They're just all in their mind and they're probably not integrating right and left brain because of the way they're moving through things and thinking about things. And so to be at home in our body, we have to connect our brain and our body. And of course, I feel one of the best ways to do that is through movement and even some gentle hands on. Like I said, just coming back to the center line of the
yeah.
body and just kind of gently walking down and pressing that center line, leading up to the belly button. And I think so that's the first stage is recognition that we are not going to always be in our bliss state, right? We're going to have challenges. We're going to have big feelings. We're going to have difficulties. And that is part of the human journey. And when we have those experiences, we need to honor them. And even sometimes, as hard as it can be, realize they're here to teach us and help us grow. And then make sure we process them. Like we don't want to sit in the emotions and not know what to do and for days be holed up because we have those emotions. We do need to be able to move through them. And again, very simple movements like I've described will help us. And I think to really become embodied in our body, it's a daily practice. And I'm all about 5-minute daily practices. When I started my career, I was all excited to give people home programs that I call home play. I wanted to make it something other than the dreaded homework. And I would say, oh my goodness, I know that I want to give you so many things and would end up being 30, 45 minutes, and people wouldn't do it because it wasn't realistic. So now I like to give people little exercises they can do 3 to 5 minutes a day. For example, waking up in the morning, swinging your feet around to the edge of the bed, making sure your feet are grounded, putting one hand on your belly button, two fingers behind the ear to connect to this very important point that is about balance. And not only balance, like stay upright balance, but balancing all that you desire to do in your life, all the responsibilities that might be coming at you, and just setting that intention with a physical connection to your body and your brain. So I hope that answered your question, but there's just so many ideas on how one could start, but I like to keep it simple.
Lovely. That's great. Great, really, really great. Thank you so much, Kelly. This is really, really an eye-opening conversation, and you have given us so much to think and so much many practical ways to reconnect with our bodies and move out of the survival mode and truly feel like home in ourselves. So, where can people find you if they want to connect and learn more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the best ways people could start and discover some of my work is with my free inner peace, nervous system relief for stress and anxiety. It's 3 short videos and it teaches some gentle hands-on opportunities like I've been describing. And you can find that at inspiredwell.com/inner peace. And it's just INNERPEACE, the traditional spelling.
Lovely. Great. Great. So, to everyone who is listening, if this conversation has resonated with you, take a moment today to pause, breathe, and check in your check in with your body. I mean, small shifts actually lead to a big changes, and you deserve to feel at ease. So, don't forget to subscribe to Healthy Mind and Healthy Life, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And on this, until next time, take care and stay connected. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.